What's up, booktube? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Laura if you're new here, and today I'm talking about some books that are perfect to read during the winter. As we may know, I love me a good seasonal read. I love having my books fit the vibe of whatever is happening around me. So I love when a book fits the weather really nicely. I've also done book recommendations for like rainy days and a few other things. I will link those down below if you want to check them out. But today is all about winter. I'm filming this video during a snowstorm, so it's even more perfect right now. I'm from the land of the north and it is already very cold here. This is not our first snowstorm. We had like a really heavy snowstorm on like the very first day of November, and then it like melted immediately, and now it looks like it's finally going to be sticking, and so it's officially goodbye to any kind of warm weather for us. So I thought today would be a perfect day to film this video. I have no idea when it's coming out, but for me it's because I am sitting in the middle of a snowstorm and I really want a good seasonal book right now. But for the rest of the northern hemisphere that has not yet had snow, don't you worry, winter is surely coming for you too, unless you're one of those lucky few who don't get snow ever, in which case I am very jealous. And also, are you single and possibly looking for a spouse who can move to your country but that never gets snow? Because like I hate this. I hate it so much. For legal reasons, I'm joking. I'm not looking to marry somebody just to immigrate to a new country. It's fine. But yeah, so for me right now, this is the perfect time of year to start getting into those cozy reads. So this video is all about books that I have read that I think really nicely fit that wintry vibe. Most of these books is because the setting of the book revolves around winter and snow and being very cold, but a few of them are just like the vibe of the book makes me feel like I want to be wrapped in a blanket on the couch reading it during a blizzard. So some of them don't have anything to do with winter at all, but they're books that just beg to be read during the winter time. I will also be doing a video very shortly on books with a wintry vibe that I have not read yet, so look out for that one. But for now, let's get into the books that I actually have read. So I'll start with the books that actually are set during the winter time, and that's why they're on this list. Starting with The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden. This is book one in the Winter Night trilogy. I've only read the first book so far, so I can't say if this whole series is very wintry, but this first book definitely is. This takes place in a northern town in Russia like several hundred years ago, where they still follow the old gods, and our main character Vasilisa, she is sighted, so she's able to see these gods, and she kind of becomes friends with them, and she keeps their spirits alive by believing in them and putting out tributes. As does the rest of the town. They also do the tributes and everything, but they can't see them, so they're more just going off of blind faith. But then things start to change when Vasilisa's father remarries and brings his new wife over from Moscow, and she is extremely religious. She's very Christian, and she brings with her a priest, and she forces the whole town to stop praying to the old gods, which causes them to start to fade and opens up the town to attack from a dark evil force. So this is a coming of age story, so we follow Vasilisa throughout like her entire life. So it's not only set in winter, but a lot of this book and like the major events are set during winter, so it definitely fits for this. I adore this book. It is stunning. It's so gorgeous. The storytelling is incredible. It's written like a classic fairy tale, but like the darker, like Grimm's fairy tale kind. So I really enjoy this book, and I cannot wait to read the next two books this season. Next up is The Little Book of Hygge by Meik Wiking. This is a non-fiction book about the Danish idea of hygge, which is just a way to live a very happy life. In English, it roughly translates to cozy togetherness, and it's the idea of doing small things that bring you a lot of joy. It's more than that though. It's like it's a whole concept, it's a whole way of living. It can really be used in many ways, but basically one of the many ways to achieve hygge is by coming home after like a long day at work. It's a snowstorm, you light a candle or several, and you have like some baked goods and some tea and a book, and it's that feeling of like just really cozy wonderfulness that you get when you finally sit down. That's kind of what hygge is, or like the general idea of it. So this book is perfect to be reading during this weather and like learning about what hygge is. I just recently finished it. I already knew about the idea of it beforehand, but I just hadn't read the book yet. Reading this book is a great way to feel hygge, so I definitely recommend this one. It is chock full of like really nice photos, and there's some recipes in here and like some cool stats and all this stuff. So it's definitely a fun read. Very quick read as well. It was really interesting. I thoroughly enjoyed this one. fun, and I would absolutely recommend this one. Next up is In the Hall with the Knife by Diana Peterfreund. This one is a murder mystery based off of the board game Clue. The book itself, I personally wasn't a huge fan of, but I've also never played the board game, so there's a very good chance that I'm just like missing something, or it may have been like a better experience if I was familiar with the game. I'm not really sure, but regardless, even though that this book wasn't for me, it may be for somebody else. And this one was definitely perfect for winter. It takes place at a very elite boarding school, and it's a few days before the Christmas holidays, so most of the students have already left for the holidays, but there's just a few students left who are just finishing up their exams. But then a massive snowstorm hits, everything is damaged, there's major flooding, and so these few students who are left, they have to go to this one building that's been relatively unaffected and stay there until things clear out. But things go wrong when the next morning the headmaster of the school is found dead with a knife in the chest, and these students have to figure out who killed him because they're the only ones here. All the roads are closed, the weather is too bad for anyone to get in and out, so they know that it has to be somebody in the house who killed him, and they have to figure out who it is before somebody else ends up dead. This one was a really fun concept. I like the idea of it. I love reading like murder mysteries during the winter time. It is like a fantastic seasonal read for that reason. Just the plot of this one was my favorite. I found it to be extremely predictable and a little bit cheesy. I did like the cheese factor. I think that it made it a lot more fun and enjoyable, but it was definitely very, very cheesy. But it was still like a pretty okay read, even though it wasn't my favorite. But regardless, I still recommend it for a wintry read. I would also recommend reading Sky in the Deep by Adrienne Young for a good wintry read. This one is a YA fantasy about several groups of warrior clans. Our main character is part of one clan called the Aska, and during a battle with their rival clan, she sees her brother fighting on the enemy side, and everyone thought that he died several years ago, and now he's all of a sudden there with the enemy. So she gets taken to their camp, and before she can escape, there is a massive snowstorm that traps her in their clan for the entire winter. So she has to spend the entire winter just trying to survive and have them not kill her because they've been fighting for centuries. And she also is trying to figure out what's going on with her brother. Basically, there's a lot more to this book. It is a really, really fast-paced, fantastic book. I loved this book so much, but I especially loved the setting of it. It was really, really interesting and like definitely good to read during the winter because like she is literally trapped in this like snow-clad mountain with her enemies who like all want to see her dead. So it was very high stakes and really interesting, and I definitely recommend this one for this time of year. The Winter Duke by Claire Eliza Bartlett is another one that I would recommend for this season. This one, as I'm sure you can tell by the title, is very, very wintry. It takes place in a fantasy world where in this town at least it is always winter. Their palace is made of ice and they live on top of a frozen lake, which underneath them there's all these like sea creatures and mermaids and all this cool stuff. It was a fascinating setting. I absolutely adore the setting of it. The actual plot of it wasn't my favorite ever. It was a little bit not boring, but like it wasn't very exciting either. This one follows a girl who is meant to be like 13th in line for the throne or something like that. Like she is like way down the line. She should not ever have taken the throne, but one night her entire family aside from her is poisoned and pretty much put into a coma, and she is now the queen out of nowhere, and she has never wanted to be the queen. So she has never studied or like put in any effort to like learn how to be a queen. So she is very reluctant. She does not want to be doing this. She's trying to figure out what happened to her family, trying to bring them back from their coma states so that she doesn't have to do this. And we kind of go from there. So this book plot-wise is mostly just like politics and her learning how to be a ruler and court drama and all this stuff, which usually is pretty fun, but I did get a little bit bored by the end of it. But the world and the setting were so fantastic that I would still recommend it. And the last book for this category of books that are actually set during the winter is Winterwood by Shea Earnshaw. This one takes place in a like mountain town where there's also like a camp or a boarding school for delinquent boys. So our main character for this book, she comes from a family of witches, and they have a special connection with the woods surrounding the town. Nobody else can walk in them, but they are able to go in there and find lost things. Only during certain times though. It's a very like dark enchanted wood kind of thing. And there is one night where there is a massive snowstorm, the worst in years, and the road is closed off so nobody can come in or out of the town. And she goes into the woods and she finds a boy who was missing from the boys camp nearby, who everyone thought he was dead. dead, but she finds him alive and he has no memory of how he got there or what happened to him. So she's basically trying to figure out what's going on with that and trying to help him solve this mystery before anybody else gets hurt. Again, love the setting. The plot was not my favorite, but in this case is because this one was mostly a romance. I'm not a huge fan of like YA romance anymore, so I went into this expecting it to be more about the witches and the forest and the snowstorm and the mystery of it, and it ended up being mostly a romance, which is not personally my thing, but it definitely is for others, so I would still recommend it if you prefer more romance than fantasy. But the setting of it was phenomenal. I loved this like dark enchanted wood that's covered in snow and everyone's stuck there. Nobody can come in or out. It was very sinister and just absolutely fantastic. The setting of it was incredible. And then I have two books that aren't like set in the winter or like have anything to do with cold at all, but they just have the vibe that they should be read during the winter time. The first one being Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahurin. I think my reasoning for this one like being kind of a more wintry vibe is because the setting of it is like very kind of grim and dark and like cold, but not like in terms of temperature, but just like more sinister kind of thing. Everything's kind of gray, so it feels like it fits the vibe of winter, even though it's not actually set during the winter. I don't think it might have been. I forget, but regardless, I recommend this one for wintry reads. This one is a fantasy romance. I believe it's new adult, so it's not quite adult, but it's like definitely older than YA. There were some steamy scenes in here. But this one follows a witch who is forced to marry a witch hunter. He has no idea that she's a witch, so she is just trying to save her own ass and hope that he does not find out, otherwise he will murder her. So this is an enemies to lovers romance set in France. I don't know when, but like a long time ago. And it was a really fun read. At the time reading it, I wasn't really that big on it because I again didn't know that it was going to be mostly romance, and I wasn't super into romance at the time, but now I am, so I like it a lot more now. But this book was just really, really fun, and I feel like it would be great just to curl up on the couch with and read this when it's like a really bad blizzard outside. I also just like really enjoy reading romance during the winter time, especially like enemies to lovers, where like it's not only like love, but there's also hate and like all these like high emotions. I think that's perfect for winter. So this one absolutely fits for that. And the last book that I have to recommend for this video is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This one is her newest book and it was incredible. I just finished it. It's one of my favorite books of the entire year, if not of all time. But this one is about a girl who makes a deal with a devil in order to live a life that is free and untethered from other people, where she can live her own life, do her thing without any of the constraints of society. She was born in France in the 1700s, so she was being forced to marry a man who she did not love and didn't want to be married to. So she makes this deal in order to be free of him, but of course there's always a trick. So the devil gives her a life that will be as long as she wants it to be, but the trick is that everybody she meets will forget her the second that she's out of sight. So if she closes the door, if they walk into a different room, when they come back, they will have no idea who she is. So yes, she has immortality, but she can't make any kind of friendships or love or make any kind of mark on the world. So it's now been 300 years since she's made this deal, and she is still living mostly out of pure spite because she was pissed off that the devil tricked her. And so she's just refusing to give him her soul for as long as she possibly can, just purely out of spite, and I love it. It's fantastic. But this one, I'm not really sure why it feels like winter for me. It just kind of does. I think maybe part of it is because she talks about being really cold all the time, because when she's talking about her life over the last 300 years and like all of the huge major hardships she's had, a lot of it has to do with like not being able to find shelter because she can't have a home. She can't go to a hotel because the owners will forget her the second that she leaves the room. So she gets kicked out. So she's often like on the streets and trying to find places to sleep, which usually ends up being outside. So she's often talking about being cold and wanting to be warm. So it's probably why it makes me feel like winter, but it's also just the vibe of it. It just also feels like the kind of book that you want to be snuggled up on the couch with. So for me, this book feels like winter, and I cannot recommend this book enough. It was absolutely incredible. Easily one of the most beautiful books that I've ever read in my entire life. It was gorgeous. So highly recommend this one. So those are all of my recommendations for books that are perfect to read during the winter season. I really enjoy doing like themed recommendations videos. So if you want to see more, let me know. Give me some ideas for things that you want to see recommendations for. I would love to do them. But in the meantime, that'll be all for today. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're all having a fantastic day wherever you are in the world, and I will catch you all in the next video. Bye!